Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the Mighty Jingles. Today we're still on the patch 8.2 test server, after having given up on the Chinese medium tanks in disgust, thanks to their god-awful gun depression. We're looking at the Chinese heavy tanks, and it's the Chinese Tier 7 heavy tank, the IS-2. Oh, wait a minute, that's the Russian Tier 7 heavy tank, the IS. That's the Chinese one. It's so easy to get those two mixed up. Yeah, and there's a good reason for that, because they're pretty much the same tank. They're not going to come as any surprise to people who've been following Chinese development history. In fact, it's not just that, well, these tanks weren't actually built by the Chinese. These are Russian tanks, which were exported to China. This is the IS-2. Now, it's slightly different to the Russian Tier 7 Heavy, the Joseph Stalin. That's the Joseph Stalin 2. Although the Russian version in the game incorporates elements of the IS-2 in the upgrades that are available for it. However, what you have here is the real deal. As you can see, the armour is slightly different. But, I mean, you're never going to look at it and mistake it for anything other than an IS. There you go. They pretty much look exactly the same. And the differences really are not just cosmetic. There are some differences, obviously, and we'll go through them. In fact, let's just compare them side by side, because this is the obvious comparison that you're going to want to make. How does it differ from the Russian tank? So there's the Chinese, there's the Russian. For some bizarre reason, the Chinese tank has more hit points. Only 50 more, not a lot. 1280 versus 1230. They weigh pretty much exactly the same, between 46 and 47 tons, depending on equipment fitted. This is where it starts getting bizarre, because it's the same weight, but the Russian tank has 700 horses in the engine and does 34 kilometers per hour, and the Chinese tank has only 580 horses under the engine, but has a 37 kilometer per hour speed limit. So it's got a worse power to weight ratio, but goes faster. Okay. Whatever. It's also more manoeuvrable. What's going on here? 3 degrees per second faster hull traverse. It's not carrying as much armour at the front. The sides and rear are exactly the same. 90 at the front, 90 at the sides, 60 at the rear. On the Russian, it's 120 at the front, 90 at the sides, 60 at the rear. The turrets are identical, 100 at the front, 90 at the sides, 90 at the rear. The view range is exactly the same. The Russian one has a slightly better radio, 600 meter signal range, and the turret traverse is exactly the same, 28 degrees per second. Well, perhaps the guns are different. No, sorry Pumpkin, guns are pretty much identical too. There is one minor difference. Let's pull the details of the guns up. See if you can spot the difference. So, quick, without looking, tell me which one's the Russian and which one's the Chinese. Yeah, the only way of telling the difference is by looking at the compatible vehicles at the bottom. They're the same friggin' gun. They even weigh the same. So, what's going on? Well, you know, they didn't try to dress it up. If you even look at the vehicle details, they'll tell you Soviet IS-2 tanks were exported to China in the early 1950s. They're not even trying to say that these are Chinese-built versions. They're just Russian tanks that were sold to the Chinese. Well, at least they're honest about it. And it plays just like the Russian Tier 7 Heavy we all know and love. Because it is the Russian Tier 7 Heavy we all know and love. So, you know, this is going to be really easy to review. It has exactly the same strengths and weaknesses as the Russian Tier 7 Heavy. It's a good tank. I like it. I like it a lot. I've always liked it. The gun works well. You know, it's a 122mm Finger of Doom. It's a horrendous aiming time, horrible accuracy, but it just obliterates whatever it hits. providing you can penetrate. So it's absolutely no different from the gun that we're all used to on most of the Russian heavy tanks. It's because it is the same gun as on all the Russian heavy tanks. You know, it's exactly the same gun. The good news is that unlike the Chinese mediums, you actually get some gun depression on this thing, which is nice and a refreshing change from crap like the WZ-120, which didn't have any gun depression whatsoever, which effectively killed it as a medium tank. But this is pleasant to drive. It's exactly as much fun as the Russian IS, because it is the Russian IS, but it's even faster and more manoeuvrable, which is kind of bizarre. And despite the fact that it has 30mm less armour at the front, it's just as bouncy, because it's got better sloping. Check that out. Well, better? Yeah, it is better. You've got this whole sloping at the front of the Russian tank, which is good, but tends to be a little bit of a shot trap. Shots that come in, smack that, bounce off and go boof right into the nose of the turret and tend to penetrate and knock the gun out or kill the gunner. The Chinese one, it has the same sort of problem, but it doesn't have that easier to penetrate, not quite as well angled bit at the front there. Right there. Like the Russian does. So, yeah, I've bounced shots from the front of this thing, no problem. You just have to take care to angle. And the sides, the cheeks of the hull, if you like, are much, much better than the front of the IS. These are very, very steeply angled, tend to get penetrated quite easily. Not so the IS-2. There's much more of an organic feel to the armour sloping. So, you know, that's good. It's just an IS that's faster, more manoeuvrable, and equally well protected. And that's not a bad thing. The gun takes forever to aim, of course, but, you know, it takes forever to reload. But this is exactly what we're used to. This doesn't come as a big shock to us. 3 guns to choose from, unlike on the Russian, which has, like, far too many guns to choose from, and only one of them's worth getting. Choices are nice and simple on the Chinese tank. There's less to research. You've got your 100mm gun, which looks different to the D10T 100mm that the Russian get. So again, it looks slightly different all round. Then you've got this thing, which is kind of functionally equivalent to the Russians. This piece of crap here, the first 122mm, the D25T, which you also get in the KV-1S. And then, of course, the big gun, which isn't fantastic, but, you know, we're used to it. It's just more of what we're used to. And you're going to find that this thing has the same problems as the IS with the Matchmaker. It's lethal in a Tier 7 game. It's competent in a Tier 8 game. It's a bit shit in a Tier 9 game. Because of this gun, the aiming time, the accuracy and the penetration on it all require you, just as when you're driving this thing, in a Tier 9 game, you have to get up close and personal to hit the weak spots and be able to penetrate and cause damage to the enemy big boys in a Tier 9 game. And you just die when you do that, because they don't have to aim carefully when they're shooting at you, and they just rip you a new one. You know, you die in 3 hits. But that's life in an IS in a Tier 9 game, unfortunately. You know, you're not a T29, you can't go hull down and protect yourself. You're not a Tiger or a Tiger P, you can't stay back and snipe with a long 88. You have to get stuck in, and that's just, you know, that's life for IS drivers, I'm afraid. And it's exactly the same for IS2 drivers. So, there you go. It's just like the Russian one, except it's Chinese. That's pretty much the only real difference. All of which means it's a good tank. I've had fun driving this thing, and it's the first Chinese tank I can say that about. Although I haven't driven many of them yet. Well, I've pretty much driven one of the light tanks, one of the mediums, and this, and this is the first one I've had fun driving, which is a shame because it's not a Chinese tank; it's a Russian tank with a fresh coat of paint and a Chinese star on the side. So, well, I'll show you what I mean. Well, this was my first game in the IS2, playing very late on a Friday night, Saturday morning, and the matchmaker struggled to actually give us a team on each side. So, yeah. This was a very, very quick game, because I ran into all sorts of trouble and died. But it did, at the very least, give us an up-close look at the AT-15, the new British premium Tier 7 tank destroyer. And that's pretty much the only reason I'm showing you this replay. So, yeah, I kind of predicted a big enemy team rush right down the middle, given the map that we're on, and how many tanks are on each team. But I seem to have been the only person who did. And yep, here they come. SU-122-44. And I don't know where this shell goes. He hasn't even seen me, look. That one seemed to go through him. Enemy is hit. No, he isn't. That exploded behind him. It actually went through. It went just over the top of his gun mantle, through his tank, and exploded behind him. So some weird server lag thing going on there. I thought that was a sure hit, but it wasn't. Let's just speed things up slightly, because I'm going to die very, very soon. But I learned something interesting. There he is. AT-15A isn't quite as well armoured as you'd like to think. Where I hit him. Right in the gun mantle. Showing nice and green. And I know I'm going to die here. I've got 3 of them shooting at me. I think it's the Tiger who finishes me off, and I don't even get the killing blow. Just as I'm about to fire, AMX M4 on the hill. If you check the map, up here, gets the killing blow, and then all 3 of them just do it, and bang, I'm dead. So, yeah, short game. But while not really illustrating much that you didn't already know about the IS-2, at the very least, a closer look at the AT-15, for those of you thinking of buying it. So, there you go. But anyway, let's have a proper game. Alright, this is more like it. Actually, you know, I've just noticed this. Is it just me? Well, look at the paint scheme of these Chinese tanks. They seem to be a lot more sort of blue-green in the garage than they appear actually out in the battlefield. They look kind of Russian. Which is, you know, weird. And there's first contact. A suiciding T-50. So yeah, on the live server just as on the test server. Oh no, there's a target I can't afford to not take a shot at. There's the aiming time. Oh, that's bad. Oh, good hit. Obviously hit him at the same time as somebody else, so I'll leave him. Focus on this Panzer IV M10, and this I refused to believe. Bounced off the side of his turret. Are you serious? Well, I don't know what angle it struck, so yeah. Second shot. Yeah, you can see that one going wide. So yeah, fine. Anyway, he's dead. We're not. Let's move on. So I've got one of these T-21 American light tanks with me here, and it's T-34-1 Tier 7 Chinese medium. They look like they might be an alright tank. That was the new Chinese Tier 6 light tank. I've been having a lot of fun with that thing. But that's more down to the kind of games you get into on the test server when you're driving a Tier 6 light tank that does get scout tank matchmaking. I.e. you, a bunch of Tier 8 artillery, and a bunch of Tier 10s. And there you go, bounced a shot from that IS-2. And then myself and T-34 finish him off with that one hit. There you go, that's what I'm talking about. That cheek armour is surprisingly bouncy. Oh, make a bit of space here for my buddy in the medium. He's a good guy to have around. He ended up, you know, ninjaing a lot of my kills, but what the hell. He's a good guy to have on your, you know, he's a good wingman to have. Go on, finish him off. There we go. Don't worry, we'll see him again in a minute. IS-2 down there with his tracks blown off. Oh, and he's got his back to me. Yeah, you're never going to hit that T-34. You should be shooting at me. Oh, he's got his tracks back up. He's reversing into him. He's learning. T-34 kills him. That guy's up to 2 kills now. Or is he? Or is he the one with 5 kills? Who knows? Who can say? And there's one on the enemy team. And yeah. Unfortunately, he kills the T-21, and the aiming time on that gun is just too slow for me to be able to help him out. However, ramming speed. So there's my second kill. And there's only 3 of the enemy team left. Notice, if you have a look at the enemy team list, it says they have an AT-15A and a Jackson. It said in the patch notes they had renamed some of the American tanks, or they'd fixed the names of some of the American tanks. The Slugger is now known as the Jackson. So there you go. That's a bit of useless information there for you. And there it is. It's hiding behind the building, isn't it? A lot of these names, the US Army didn't go in for naming their vehicles. The Slugger, the Jackson, names like this for vehicles were actually invented by the press, just to give a bit of personality to their combat reports. And there we go, game over. Yeah, well, that was more like it. Nothing spectacular. Quite lucky to get a Tier 7 maximum game on the test server, especially at this time of night. Well, not a spectacular game. 2 kills, damaged a whole bunch of tanks, blah blah blah, so on and so on. Notice I'm not running a premium account on the test server this time around, and that's a 1000 XP game without premium. Would have been a 1500 XP game on a standard account. Also not doubled, so yeah, not bad. And yeah, that's more like it. That's more where I'm used to being. Detailed report. Yeah, 12 shots fired, 10 hits. Yeah, that's that gun for you. Of the 10 that hit, 8 penetrated and did nearly 3,000 damage. So yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, it was alright. It's the kind of game you expect to see when you're driving an IS, when you're top tier in the match. Nothing spectacular there. Exactly how you would expect this tank to perform. And that's pretty much exactly what it does. So yeah, the Chinese Tier 7 IS-2 heavy tank. It's a good tank, but I could have told you that without going on the test server, because it is the Russian Tier 7 heavy tank. Not just in name, it is the same damn tank. There are some minor, very, very minor differences. It doesn't have quite as good power to weight ratio, but it does go faster, it turns faster, it's got exactly the same gun, it's identical in every other respect other than slightly less signal range, and the armour profile is almost exactly the same, except 30mm less armour at the front, but better sloping, and a more rounded hull cheeks, if you like, for slightly better protection at the sides, slightly less protection at the front. It just means you have to angle it more, and overall the same level of armour protection. And if you're any good at driving the IS, you're going to be good at driving the IS too. And that pretty much sums it up. It's certainly a good solid introduction to the Chinese heavy tanks, if the other Chinese heavy tanks follow in that vein, but we shall have to see. Nothing wrong with the IS-2 though. It's a decent tank. You'll have fun driving it. If you enjoy the IS, you'll enjoy this. So, more Chinese 8.2 preview test server goodies to come in future videos. As always, take care on the battlefield, and I'll catch you next time.